Let's dive in. So what is a synchronicity? How do you define it, and a super synchronicity? And it'd be great to know the various types that you identified too.
Well, synchronicities are, quote, coincidences or co-occurrences of two or more events in a close proximity in time, sometimes simultaneous, but often more typically sequentially, where the probability of their occurring by chance is small, and where not only do they typically occur at meaningful times in our lives, but often we don't know the meaning at the time that they occur. So often they're mysterious, and they require that we be detectives and that we seek out what the meaning or significance is. Synchronicities first became recognized, I think, by Carl Jung, the distinguished psychoanalyst, in his book Synchronicity. And there have been a number of people who have written about synchronicity since. Some people have bridged science and synchronicity like Jung did, and some of this work was I talk about this in the Sacred Promise book. The more recent work by a psychiatrist whose name is Bernard Beitman, he wrote a book called, I think it was called Connecting with Coincidence. And he uses the term coincidence as opposed to synchronicity because he's trying to be, quote, more conservative, because some people think that coincidence is equivalent to chance, and therefore it has no meaning. So it becomes dismissed as a coincidence, not recognizing that that's actually an interpretation which may or may not be valid. But then he used the word synchronicity in the subtitle. But he calls it coincidence science, the evolving science, coincidence. I prefer the term synchronicity partly because it honors Jung and because it deals with synchronization which is a broader term. Now, in my life and in my book, I talk about three types of synchronicity, what I call type 1, type 2, and type 3. And type 1 is the most frequent one that we have. It's the one that most people are aware of, and that's simply a pair of events. So in order to have a synchronicity, you have to have two things happen. And typically when the first one happens, you don't know it's a synchronicity until the second one happens. And then it confirms the first one that happens. And when that pair occurs, you go, wow. You say, gee, that's interesting. That's a type 1. Now, a type 2 synchronicity is when that pair of events continues in terms of content and meaning. And I call type 2 synchronicities when you have 3, 4, or 5 in a row. So they're serial coincidences, to use Bernard Beitman's language, and that's a type 2. But then you can have 6 or more synchronicities serially. And I call that a type 3 synchronicity. And a type 3 synchronicity starts becoming extremely improbable. That's when you start really seeing these very high probabilities of improbability occur. And I call those type 3 synchronicities super synchronicities, in the spirit of the way science uses the word super, like superconductivity, or supercomputers, or super colliders, or super clusters of galaxies. I wasn't using it in the more lay language like supermarkets or Superman. I have no objection to those, either those places or the fictional character. But I meant the word super in a serious way, like superconductivity or super collider.